That night, Kris Kristofferson had 4 hours and 40 minutes. If he miscalculated by 15 minutes in either direction, two different versions of his future would collapse, and only one person would ever know why. The call had come 3 days earlier. Ray Holloway's wife didn't introduce herself. She didn't need to. Kris recognized the particular quiet that enters a voice when someone is delivering information they've already had to say too many times. "Ray wants you at the Torch on Saturday," she said. "He's asking for specific people. You're one of them." Kris didn't ask how long Ray had. "You didn't ask that." "What time?" he said. 9 o'clock. He'll be there by 8:30. Kris looked at the calendar on the wall above his phone. Saturday night. The Troubadour showcase was Saturday night. 7 o'clock. Los Angeles. Industry people. The show that was supposed to change everything. "I'll be there," he said. She thanked him. The call ended. Kris stood in his kitchen for a long time after that, doing math that wouldn't work no matter how he approached it. The Troubadour was 3 years of groundwork compressed into 90 minutes. Labels were confirmed. Producers were coming. People who didn't return calls had personally requested seats. This wasn't an opportunity. It was the door opening exactly once. The Torch Lounge was a bar outside Llano, Texas, where Ray Holloway had been playing Thursday through Saturday for 26 years. Ray had given Kris his first paying gig in 1965, had let him sleep on his couch for 5 months when sleeping in cars was becoming difficult to explain, had never asked Kris for anything, until now. Los Angeles to Llano, 1,340 miles. The Troubadour set, 7 p.m., doors at 6:30. The Torch, 9 p.m., Ray arriving at 8:30. Kris did the math 5 different ways. Rented car, charter flight from Burbank, commercial with a connection through Dallas. Each version ended the same way, barely possible or not possible at all. On Thursday afternoon, he called his manager. "I need to leave the Troubadour by 7:45, Kris said. "You're closing the show." "I know." "You'll have 20 minutes, maybe 25. You can't build anything in 20 minutes. I can do 3 songs. "Kris, every person in that room is there for you. If you run out after 3 songs, they'll think something's wrong. Then let them think that." His manager was quiet for a long time. "What's in Texas?" he finally asked. "A promise." "To who?" Kris didn't answer. "This is the showcase," his manager said. "This is what we've been working toward for 3 years. If you leave early, if you make people feel like you don't want to be there." "I'll make it work," Kris said. He didn't explain how. Saturday came the way Saturday always comes, without adjusting for what you need from it. Kris flew into Burbank at noon. He'd arranged a car, not a rental, a driver, someone who wouldn't ask questions and who understood that speed mattered more than comfort. The plan was simple in the way that plans are simple when they require everything to go exactly right. Play the Troubadour. 3 songs, maybe 4 if they were short. Leave by 7:45. Drive to Burbank. Charter plane to Austin, already paid for, pilot on standby. Land at 11:30 Central. Drive to Llano. Walk into the Torch before Ray finished his first set. Kris had accounted for traffic. He'd accounted for delays. What he hadn't accounted for was the way time behaves when you're trying to compress it, like it knows and resists. The Troubadour was full by 6:45. Kris arrived at 6:15 and immediately understood he'd miscalculated something fundamental. The room wasn't just full, it was crowded with a specific kind of attention, the kind that doesn't forgive distraction. His manager found him near the back door. "Everyone's here," he said. "Columbia, RCA, Warner Brothers, Kristofferson, this is it." Kris nodded. He was watching the clock above the bar, 6:17. "You look nervous," his manager said. "I'm fine." "You're never nervous." Kris didn't respond. He was doing the math again. If he started at 7, played until 7:20, he'd be in the car by 7:25. Burbank by 7:55. Wheels Up by 8:10. That gave him 20 minutes of margin. 20 minutes for everything that could go wrong. It wasn't enough, but it was what he had. At 6:50, someone from the label pulled him aside. "We want to introduce you before you go on," the man said. "Just a few words, context for the people who don't know your work." "How long?" Kris asked. 5 minutes, maybe 10. "No," the man blinked. "It's standard. It helps frame. I don't need framing. Put me on at 7. The man looked at Kris's manager, who shrugged in a way that suggested this was now someone else's problem. "Okay," the man said slowly. 7 o'clock. Kris thanked him and walked toward the stage entrance. He could feel something tightening in his chest, not panic, but its precursor. The feeling that comes when you realize you've committed to two incompatible futures and are now going to discover which one you actually chose. They introduced him at 7:03. The applause was warm, expectant. Kris walked onto the stage with his guitar and sat on the stool they'd set up for him. The lights were brighter than he'd expected. He couldn't see faces past the third row. He didn't say anything. He started playing. The first song was Me and Bobby McGee. He'd played it 1,000 times, but tonight it felt different. Faster, more urgent. He was rushing without meaning to. Halfway through the second verse, he forced himself to slow down. If he looked hurried, people would notice. If people noticed, they'd remember. The song ended at 7. The applause was louder this time. Someone in the back whistled. Kris adjusted the tuning on his guitar and started Sunday Morning Coming Down. Without pausing, this was the song they'd come to hear. He could feel the room shift, the particular attention that happens when people recognize something they've been waiting for. Kris sang it the way he'd written it, spare and direct. No embellishment, no performance. 7:12. 33 minutes left. After the second song, someone shouted for "Help Me Make It Through the Night." Kris nodded and started playing. This one was slower. He couldn't rush it without destroying what made it work. So he didn't rush. He played it the way it needed to be played and watched the clock in his peripheral vision climb past 7:15, then 7:17, then 7:19. The song ended at 7:21. He had 24 minutes. The applause kept going. Someone stood, then several people. Kris set his guitar down and stood up. He started to walk off stage. "One more," someone shouted. The crowd picked it up. "One more, one more." Kris stopped at the edge of the stage. His manager was standing in the wings, shaking his head, not in refusal, but in warning. If Kris walked off now, after 3 songs, after a standing ovation, it would look like something. Arrogance, maybe, or disrespect. Either way, it would be remembered. But if he stayed, Kris looked at the clock, 7:23. He walked back to the stool and picked up his guitar. "One more," he said quietly. The room settled. He started For the Good Times. It was a mistake. He knew it as soon as he began. This song was too slow, too gentle. It would take 5 minutes, maybe 6. He was giving away time he couldn't afford to lose. But he played it anyway, because walking off after 3 songs would cost him 1 future, and playing 4 might, if everything else went perfectly, let him keep both. The song ended at 7:29. Kris stood up, said "thank you," and walked off stage before the applause could build into another request. His manager caught him in the hallway. "That was incredible," he said. "People are—" "I have to go," Kris said. "What?" "I have to go, now." Kris pushed past him toward the back exit. His manager followed. "Kris, wait. There are people who want to meet you. Tell them I'm sorry. You can't just leave. This isn't." Kris turned around. His manager stopped talking. "I have to go," Kris said again. "Right now." His manager looked at him for a long moment. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "No," Kris said, "but I gave you my word on this 3 days ago." He walked out the back door before his manager could respond. The driver was waiting where he'd said he would be. Kris got in the car. "Burbank Airport," he said. "Fast as you can." The driver nodded and pulled out into traffic. From 7:32. Kris sat in the back seat and tried to breathe slowly. The math was getting tighter. Burbank by 8. In the air by 8:15. Land in Austin by 11:45. Llano by 1 a.m. Too late. He'd known it was too late as soon as he'd played the 4th song, but he'd played it anyway because the alternative was walking off stage after 3 songs in front of everyone who mattered, and that would have ended something before it started. So now he was going to be late to Texas. And Ray was going to be there at 8:30, and Kris wasn't going to walk in until after 1 a.m., and Ray would understand, or he wouldn't. And either way, Kris had made a choice. He just wasn't sure which choice he'd made. Traffic on the 101 was heavier than it should have been for a Saturday night. The driver took surface streets. Kris watched the city slide past the window and felt the specific helplessness that comes from being in motion but not in control. 7:51. They pulled into the airport at 8:03. Kris paid the driver and ran toward the charter terminal. The pilot was standing outside, waiting. "We're fueled and ready," the pilot said. "Weather's clear. We'll make good time." They were in the air by 8:14. Kris sat in the small cabin and watched Los Angeles disappear beneath them. The city looked the way it always looked from above, scattered and provisional, like something that might not be there the next time you checked. He tried to calculate the new math. Wheels down in Austin at 11:40, car to Llano by 12:50. He'd be late, but not impossibly late. Ray played sets until midnight most Saturdays. If tonight was like most Saturdays, Kris might still make it. But tonight wasn't like most Saturdays. Tonight was the night Ray Holloway was saying goodbye. Somewhere over New Mexico, Kris fell asleep. He didn't mean to. He was just sitting in the dark cabin, listening to the engine, and then he was waking up to the pilot's voice over the intercom. "We'll be landing in 15 minutes. Kris looked at his watch. 11:52. He'd lost 12 minutes. Not much, but enough to matter. They landed at 12:04. Kris had arranged for another car. The driver was waiting. "Llano," Kris said. "Torch Lounge. You know it?" "I know it," the driver said. They drove fast, faster than was safe. The highway was empty and dark, and Kris watched the white lines blur past and tried not to think about what he was going to say when he arrived. "I'm sorry I'm late. I had to be somewhere else first. I made a choice, and it was the wrong choice, but I made it anyway." None of those seemed right. They pulled into Llano at 1:14 a.m. The Torch Lounge was a small building on the edge of town, barely visible from the road. The parking lot was nearly empty. 3 trucks, 1 sedan. The lights were still on inside. Kris paid the driver and walked toward the entrance. The door was unlocked. He pushed it open. Inside, the bar was almost empty. A bartender was wiping down glasses. 2 men sat at a table near the back, talking quietly. On the small stage in the corner, Ray Holloway was sitting on a stool with a guitar, playing to no one. He looked up when Kris walked in. For a moment, neither of them said anything. Then Ray smiled. "Thought you weren't going to make it," he said. "I wasn't sure I would," Kris said. Ray nodded slowly. He looked tired, not the normal tired, but the kind that settles permanently, the kind you don't recover from. "You're the last one," Ray said. "Everyone else already came through." Kris walked over to the stage. "I'm sorry I'm late." "You're not late. You're here." Ray set his guitar down and stood up carefully. He was thinner than Kris remembered, smaller somehow. "I heard you had a big show tonight," Ray said. Kris stopped. "How did you—" "Your manager called my wife. Wanted to know what was so important in Llano that you'd leave early." Ray smiled. "She didn't tell him." Kris didn't say anything. "You didn't have to come," Ray said. "I would have understood." "I know, but you came anyway." "I said I would." Ray looked at him for a long moment. "Sit down," he said. "Play something." Kris climbed onto the stage and picked up the guitar Ray had set down. It was an old Martin, worn smooth in all the right places. "What do you want to hear?" Kris asked. "Whatever you played tonight," Ray said. So Kris played "Me and Bobby McGee." Then "Sunday Morning Coming Down." Then "Help Me Make It Through the Night." Then "For the Good Times." He played them the way he'd played them 3 hours earlier, spare, direct, no embellishment. But this time he wasn't watching a clock. This time he was playing for an audience of 1, in a bar that was closing, for a man who'd asked him to be there. When he finished, Ray was sitting at one of the tables, eyes closed. "That's good work," Ray said quietly. "That's real good work." "I learned from you," Kris said. Ray opened his eyes. "No, you didn't. You learned from yourself. I just gave you a place to do it." Kris set the guitar down and sat across from Ray. They didn't talk about the future. They didn't talk about the past. They talked about small things, mutual friends, old gigs, the particular acoustics of rooms that don't exist anymore. At 2:30 a.m., Ray's wife came to pick him up. She thanked Kris for coming. Ray shook his hand. "You made the right choice tonight," Ray said. Kris wasn't sure how to respond to that. "Which choice?" he asked. Ray smiled. "Both of them." Kris flew back to Los Angeles the next morning. His manager called him at noon. "Where did you go last night?" he asked. "Texas." "Why?" Kris thought about how to answer that. "Someone asked me to," he said finally. His manager was quiet for a moment. "Well, it worked," he said. "Columbia wants to talk. So does RCA. Everyone's calling. They want to know when you can meet. That's good, Kris said. That's good? Kris, this is everything we've been working for. I know. You don't sound excited. I am, Kris said. I'm just tired. His manager laughed. Get some rest. We'll talk tomorrow. Kris hung up the phone and sat on the edge of his bed. He'd made it to both stages. He'd kept both promises. He'd driven through the night and played 4 songs twice and arrived late, but not too late. And now he had the future he'd been working toward. But what he kept thinking about was Ray Holloway, sitting in an empty bar at 2:30 in the morning, saying, "You made the right choice." Not choices. Choice. Singular. As if there'd only ever been one decision, and everything else was just the mechanics of getting there. Ray Holloway died 6 weeks later. Kris was in New York when he got the call. He flew back to Texas for the funeral. The service was small. Ray's wife asked Kris to play. He played for the good times. Afterwards, several people came up to him. "That was beautiful," they said. "Did you write that for Ray?" they asked. Kris told them he hadn't. He told them he'd written it years ago. But as he said it, he wasn't sure if that was true anymore. Some songs change meaning depending on where you play them. Some choices become the right choice retroactively because you made them. Years later, an interviewer asked Kris about his breakthrough. "You had your big showcase at the Troubadour in 1971, the interviewer said. "That's when everything changed for you, right?" "That's right," Kris said. "What do you remember about that night?" Kris thought for a moment. "I remember leaving early," he said. The interviewer laughed, assuming it was a joke. Kris didn't correct him.